to be live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Trivia Tuesday for International Dark Sky Week. We found the background music in StreamYard, so we're listening to Dance Pop here today to get the party started.
Popping off.
And we are so excited to be joined by none other than the Dr. John Barentine. Are we all good on the stream? If you are here and tuning in, please pop in a hello and where you are calling in from. I'm joining you today from Tucson, Arizona. And
I'm up here in Denver, Colorado.
Johnny B.
I am in Tucson, Arizona also.
Nice.
Tucson party.
All right, everybody, just give us a comment. Let us know you're here. Pop in a hello with where you are calling in from. We would love to see where everybody is today.
Yes.
While I introduce John. Jim from Rhode Island. Awesome. Joshua. Hello, Joshua. Great to see you. We got Mexico City. We got Rhode Island. We got at least two people here. Jim and Josh. You guys are going to be going head to head.
Yes.
Michael, are we on YouTube or on Facebook?
We are on both.
Facebook. Okay, and we're on Twitter too. Oh, we got Ridgecrest, California. Hi, Debbie. All right, so here we have with us today. Can I somehow, I can't figure out how to make this person the big person. But I was going to try to make John the big person. But you're just going to get all of us equally because I can't figure it out. So John Barentine is my dear friend, and he is an astronomer, historian, author, science communicator, and all-around the coolest dark sky person you'll probably ever meet.
Yep.
He is the principal consultant at Dark Sky Consulting, LLC. And before that, he worked with me at IDA for 8 whole years. He earned a PhD in astronomy from the University of Texas and is a member of the American Astronomical Society, the International Astronomical Union, and the Royal Astronomical Society. And don't you have an asteroid named after you as well, John?
I do. It's where I'm going to go to retire.
Oh. Nice. And we're about to get our samples back from, I can't remember that, Bennu? Was it Bennu?
Mm-hmm.
In September, right?
Coming soon.
Cool. So hopefully you can find a way to synthesize some water and some nutrients for yourself and your retirement home. But awesome. Okay, we got Minnesota here, Argentina, Tucson, and North Carolina. Awesome. Great to see everybody here. And okay, well, let's just give people a couple more minutes to join, and we'll talk a little bit about Dark Sky Week, what's been going on so far, and what you can expect coming up. Michael, maybe you want to pop the chat in the one event that we had for trivia and just let people know it's a different event.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. But I'll just let people know. Well, maybe we can start with John. John, how's Twitter been doing for International Dark Sky Week so far?
I'm seeing a lot of tweets and a lot of engagement with those tweets as well. And it's not only Twitter. I'm really seeing it across all of the major platforms, including the big emerging platform of the past year, which is Mastodon. A lot of people have moved over there, or at least have started up accounts over there. I'm seeing a lot of interaction with the hashtags on Mastodon as well. And LinkedIn, I've seen a number of posts on there as well. So it looks like we have a pretty good audience this time around who's paying attention, and they're posting and they're using the hashtags, and we're getting a lot of useful analytical data out of that as well.
Heck yeah. I didn't even know Mastodon was a thing, so you learn something new every day. I will be looking into that. But yeah, hashtag IDSW 2023, hashtag Discover the Night, hashtag Dark Sky Week. Please share. And I'm going to pop in a link in the chat right now. If you are not part of IDA's Advocate Network, please join us. We have monthly trainings on different subjects around dark skies. We have an online global community platform where you can connect with different dark sky advocates from around the world. And it's just a great place to make dark sky friends. We're going to be having an advocate specific mixer on Friday of Dark Sky Week. So you can sip whatever drink is your preference and chat with people all around the world and learn from them what they're doing and share what you've been doing for Dark Skies and how to get involved. So please consider joining us if you're excited about Dark Sky Week and you love Dark Skies as much as we do. We also want to invite everybody tomorrow. We'll be back here on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitter with the Travis Longcore as well. I think he was the only other person I put "the" in front of their name besides John Barron. One of the most requested and influential presenters and researchers on the field of artificial light at night and ecological impacts. So join us back here tomorrow for that. Michael, what we got going on Friday?
On Friday, we have a Star Walk featuring Samyuktha Manikumar from Kenya. She's on the IDA board of directors. She's going to tell us about the night sky in the southern hemisphere. And then from Sky and Telescope magazine, we got Kelly Beatty, who's going to take us a tour of the northern hemisphere sky, as you will see it from clear, unlight polluted skies this week. So definitely tune in for that. They have been instrumental in celebrating Dark Sky Week. So it's going to be awesome to see what they have to say about the night sky. So join us for that on Friday.
Well, I will be there. So we look forward to seeing you all there. And you know what? I think there's enough of us who have joined now. So maybe we'll go ahead and get started. I see we got a Tucson person here, Mark. Awesome to see some local Tucson folks here. We've dropped by the office sometime, maybe. Obviously, I'm not in the office, but there are people who go to the office.
Sometimes people go to the office.
And we are working on the Tucson FEMA lighting code update as well, right, John? So plenty of ways to get involved here locally and keep these skies here in Tucson dark. So I will do my best here to present our exciting trivia presentation.
Really hope everybody else can hear the music, or else I look like a goofball.
Yeah, can you guys hear the music?
There's music, we promise.
Screen too. All right, you guys can see all that? I think so. Okay, I'm gonna maybe turn my video off, and maybe I'll turn the music off too.
They can hear the music. They
can hear the music. Do you guys want the music on, or do you want the music off? Maybe I'll just turn it down a little bit.
That's the next question. Do you want to hear the music?
Very quiet. Some quiet pop music in the background. We'll turn it off if it gets annoying, but this is party vibe. We're celebrating Dark Skies this week, so let's leave it on. Okay. It's not that loud. Okay, cool.
Right.
Thanks, Mark. All right. We are turning it over to the Dr. John Barentine. Take it away, John.
Well, thank you, Betty Maya. Thanks to IDA for setting this up this year. We're going to do something a little bit different, and that is to couple some factual presentations, some just little short bits of information on dark skies with some trivia questions in a little competition style format. Hopefully this will be of interest to everybody, no matter what your level of knowledge of the subject is or your background in this, and that you'll learn something. I learned something as part of putting the slides together. So if you will go ahead and advance to the next slide for me, please, Betty Maya. And okay. So what this is themed around is a report that IDA issued for the first time last year called Artificial Light at Night, State of the Science. I wrote this report for IDA. It's available online. It's available through the IDA website. And the idea is that it summarizes the best of what we know about the scientific understanding of light pollution from studies all over the world. And the idea behind it is to put in one place, in some accessible language, as much as we know about this subject to benefit anybody who does any sort of communications or activism related to dark skies. And it's composed of sections that are around these 7 topical areas that are shown at the bottom right on this slide, so that you can pick out any one of those sections and read the best of what we know about that topic And then there's a long set of references at the end of the report. So if you want to dig into the sources any further, you can do that. If you want to share the report with others so that it comes across credibly with the references to the scientific literature, we certainly encourage you to do that. So what we're going to do today is talk about some of the results in this report. And as I've noted there's a revision that is coming that will include research that was published during 2022. We'd hope to have it ready for Dark Sky Week, but it's running a little bit behind because it's under external review right now. But we hope to have that published in the next few weeks. So if you'll go ahead to the next slide, this will show you the instructions for how to participate in the trivia today. So we're using the platform called Slido. There is a number there on the screen. You can either go to their website and punch in that number in order to set yourself up in the game, or if you're using a mobile device, for example, you can scan that little QR code right there on the left. And we'll give everybody a few seconds here to go ahead and get connected, maybe about 30 seconds or so, and then we'll start the game.
And we should be able to see everyone who's joining once we start our trivia as well. We should be able to see your name, so please don't put an inappropriate name on there or I'll have to figure out how to kick you out, which I'm not sure how to do. But trust me, I can figure it out. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next one.
Okay. Great. So we're going to start with the biggest of big pictures. And this is an image that you probably have seen before if you've had anything to do with dark skies in the past. This is an image that was made by the NASA and NOAA agencies here in the US that shows the Earth at night as though it were night everywhere at once and with no clouds anywhere on Earth. And it took a year to make this image based on stitching together lots of individual satellite images that were taken during that year to ensure that there was at least one image of every place that didn't have any clouds. And so what this is showing us is that our cities shine really brightly. You can see them, all those little dots of what look like yellow. In comparison, the oceans are pretty dark. The continents stand out because of moonlight during some parts of the year when the images were made, so that you can see the continents is separate from the oceans. But our cities are what really stand out here to me. And it shows us that in only about 130 years since the introduction of electric lighting into outdoor spaces, we as humans have really changed the geography of the night across the world. And that light that's coming up from the surface, this is what the satellites are detecting. That light has to go all the way through the atmosphere before it reaches the satellites. And yet it's still intense enough that the satellite detectors can see it and record it. And there's a relationship between that upward directed light and the effect on the night sky that I'll talk a little bit about here more in a moment. But just know that generally where you see more of that yellow light on this map, that means that the night sky quality tends to be a little bit worse. And so that brings us to our first trivia question. So if you go ahead to the next slide, please. So that question is, by what percentage on average has the night sky around the world been getting brighter in recent years? So if you're following along with us on Slido, you should now see an option to answer this question.
I'm letting people join. It looks like we have 4 people in here so far. So you guys can scan this QR code with your smartphone or go to slido.com and enter this number here to get started. And we got 25 people currently watching. So I'm going to give people a couple more seconds to get started. Looks like we got Alejandro. I'm guessing that's P Mission. Seattle Dan. Cool. Alex, Adam, Jim. Welcome, everyone. This is our first time using this platform for trivia, so hopefully it works. Okay, well, if you didn't make it, you have opportunities to join at the next question as well. Henrik, welcome, Henrik. Jim, it will show up as soon as I advance the slide. Amy Aurora, what a beautiful name. Oz, cool. Michael, do you want to be back in the stream or do you want to be hidden in the back? I'm adding you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Make it the party. I can't like take our videos off of this for some reason. So
it's great to be back.
Okay. All right. Ah is joining us. Welcome, Ah. Welcome, Vladislav. Okay, cool. I feel like we got a decent amount of folks here.
I don't know the questions or the answers to everybody who's playing, so I'm not like a ringer or anything. I'm going to get a lot of these wrong.
Yeah, and for participation, let's see, we don't really have any prizes for the winner except for really feeling proud of yourself that you are the smartest dark sky person here today. So I think that's worth a lot. I mean, we can make you like a certificate. This is #1 smartest person of dark sky trivia during Dark Sky Week 2023, and you can hang that on your wall. Okay, we're going to the next one. Here is our question. You have 20 seconds. So by what percentage on average has the night sky around the world been getting brighter in recent years? This goes by quick. 5. All right. Okay, most people got this right. John, you can't see the
Nope, I can't see the results at all. So I'm gonna have to rely on you to tell me.
All right, we got 89% of us chose 10% per year, which was the correct answer. So congratulations to those of you who picked correctly.
That is the right answer. Yeah, and a lot of people must be paying attention because that's some very recent research results that were just published in January. Yep. So if you follow any of the IDA communications, or you might have heard about it in the news, this is the result of a program that's been running for a little over 10 years called Globe at Night. Some of you may have participated in that before, and it helps assess the brightness of the night sky around the world by asking people to count stars in certain constellations. And the authors gathered all that information together and used our understanding of how the brightness of the night sky relates to the number of stars we count. And that's how they were able to arrive at that figure of about 10% per year, which was kind of surprising to us because it's a lot higher than the estimate we had before, which was only about 2% a year. And it really underscores the need for us to be really proactive in how we're approaching dealing with light pollution. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go on to the next part, which is about sky glow and the way that we use light. So this image that you're seeing now, which is a view of Los Angeles, California, shows this phenomenon we call sky glow. So that's that kind of orange cloud that appears just above the horizon in this image, and it makes it very difficult to see the stars that are beyond that. This is light that's coming from all of those sources that you can see there on the ground in the city that go up into the sky at night and scatter from little dust particles and molecules in the atmosphere, and some of that light comes back down to the ground. So when I showed you the map of the world in the previous image, that's the light that makes it all the way through the atmosphere. It doesn't interact with anything on the way out, and that's what the satellites are seeing. But a good fraction of that light will come back down to the ground, and we see it as this thing called sky glow. This is what mostly comes to mind when people hear the term light pollution. It's one symptom of light pollution. There are others that I'll talk about in a moment, but this is what makes it difficult for us to see the stars at night. So the other ways in which we might experience light pollution besides sky glow are summarized here, and it shows light from a street light in a typical city environment and traces where some of the light rays go. And some of them certainly go to the places on the ground where we need that light at night. That's the target of the lighting. This is what we want to be able to see at night. But this also shows how some of that light that goes to that target area reflects off of the ground and then into the night sky, where it can cause that phenomenon of sky glow. Some of it is glare, so it falls outside of the area that it's intended to light. Some of it is light trespass. It will enter properties and buildings where often that light is not wanted. And then the cloud that's in the sky overhead here is meant to show how on nights when the sky is cloudy, the brightness of the ground is higher because the clouds are scattering more of that light down to the surface. And there's even some research that shows that when there's snow on the ground or changes in the ground conditions, whether it's ice or water from rain can be reflective of light, that can make the brightness even higher. So this really causes us to ask questions about how efficiently are we using all that lighting. So if you'll go on to the next slide, our next trivia question is, what percentage of light emitted by outdoor light fixtures serves a useful purpose? How much of that light is actually reaching the intended target and then reaches the human eye? So we'll give you a few seconds to answer this one.
Betty Maya, you're muted.
Thank you. We got an interesting split here. 44% of people both said 15% and 35% is wasted, and 11% said less than 1. So let's see what the correct answer is. Less than 1.
Less than 1%. Yeah, and in fact, it's a lot less than 1%. There's some research that suggests that of the many, many billions and billions of photons that are made by artificial lights in outdoor spaces at night, that we are only sensing 1 in perhaps as few as 20 million of those little particles of light. So we're really not very great at sensing that light at night, and it means that we have to be very careful about where we're putting that light and trying to use the minimum amount we can in the right places and at the right times to ensure that people have the light that they need to get around, but that to the greatest extent, we're not wasting that light. Okay, let's go on to the next slide, which shows the phenomenon of energy waste that's associated with all this artificial light at night. And you kind of get a sense of how much energy is wasted by looking at this image. I think this is downtown San Francisco. That looks like the Transamerica building over there on the left. And there's waste of light everywhere in this image. This is taken somewhat above ground level, probably from the roof of another building. So we're looking out both above the direction towards the horizon and below. And one thing that stands out is that there are a lot of sources of light on the ground that must be shining upward because they can be seen from this level. The streets are lit too brightly. You can see the streets between some of the buildings here. There appears to be a lot of light. Typically, streets are lit to a level that is a lot higher than what we really need at night in order to be able to see to get around safely. Light is projecting directly out of the windows of these buildings. In many large cities across the world, skyscraper buildings have their lights left on all night long. And this is, I'll point out in a moment, has consequences for some wildlife, especially for migratory birds. And there's floodlighting here on some of the building roofs that's projecting light into directions that just nobody will see. It doesn't matter, what time of night it is or what people are doing. A lot of that light just never reaches any sort of intended target. And if you think about how we make electricity, this really adds up over time. So if you go on to the next slide, please. Energy waste is something that also contributes to climate change. Right now, we still generate about 80% of our electrical energy consumption from fossil fuels around the world. We're making strides in reducing our dependence on fossil fuels and using more renewables, but the number is still very high, and it's contributing to carbon emissions that we know are warming the planet. The energy used to generate all of this artificial light at night that escapes to space is at least 1% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. This comes from a combination of some research that was published last year and also some estimates by the US Department of Energy. And we could very easily reduce our carbon footprint by at least that much if we just eliminated all of this wasteful light. If we were using less of it, we wouldn't need as much electricity in order to generate all of that light. So that leads to our next question. So if you go on to the next slide, and that is, how much money does wasted outdoor light at night escaping to space represent in annual energy costs? So here we want you to think about dollars. This is US dollars around the world. How much do you think that is?
I'm sorry, I'm struggling here. I don't know why it's just turned like a weird blue color. But let's see. Okay, here we go. 20 seconds, starting now. Sorry about the weird blue overlay. I'm not quite sure why that's happening.
We're figuring this out.
I feel like I kind of gave you guys the answer on this one a little, so maybe this is a little freebie for you guys. Okay, another even split between 100 billion and 50 billion, with 9% guessing 1 billion. You want to tell us the answer, John?
The correct answer is about 50 billion US dollars a year. And that's a lot of money. You know, that money could be used for all kinds of other things. But at the same time, it's not just dollars, but it's also that climate cost. So this is why it's really important for us to be mindful about how we're using artificial light at night, not only in order to save the expense that's associated with all of that waste, but also to reduce the impact to the environment as much as we possibly can. Okay, I think we are ready to move on to the next slide, which shows you two views of a typical street scene like you would see in different cities in the world. And the lighting is very different, even though the circumstances are very similar. And what this is meant to indicate is something about how we use light around the world in ways that relate to the social status of different kinds of people. And public lighting in particular, like lighting of streets and sidewalks, can be applied in ways that differ significantly depending upon the social and economic status of people who live in those areas with the illumination. And there are choices that governments make all the time about outdoor lighting that can reflect bias towards people based on their race, their ethnicity, where they live in a city or in a country, or their social class. And we have some evidence that in some cases, outdoor lighting is applied in a way that could be thought of as punishing people, or applied in ways that the hope seems to be that it will discourage criminal behavior. And that's despite the fact that we don't have a lot of research results that suggest that there is any definite connection between outdoor light at night and criminal behavior. Even though there's a lot of received wisdom that says that adding light to outdoor spaces or making it brighter in cases where the light already exists can reduce the incidence of crime during the overnight hours, we just really don't see that evidence in the scientific data. So there is an emerging sense of what is sometimes called light justice. That's the practice of planning, designing, implementing, and investing in lighting for communities that are historically neglected. And that's through a process of stakeholder respect and engagement. So we need to think carefully about how we're using light at night to make sure that it's done in ways that are fair and equitable and are not somehow harming or punishing people based on who they are or where they live. And so we have one major study on that. If you go ahead and go to the next, this is the next trivia question. So there's some research that was published in 2019 that showed Americans of different racial and ethnic backgrounds are exposed to different levels of light pollution. How much more or less does light pollution do members of racial and ethnic minorities receive than whites, according to this research? So I'll give you a chance to answer this one.
We got 100% of people who know this answer, actually.
That's really encouraging. Do we have the results up yet?
Yep, I do.
All right, great. So this was kind of surprising work. This was done by some folks at the University of Utah, and they found that people who live in areas where racial and ethnic minorities are more common in the U.S. experience about 50% more light pollution than people who live in other areas. And that's true even after we control for things like the densities of populations in cities. We don't yet know exactly what the cause and effect relationship is here. But again, we have some suggestions that there are some biases in the way that we're designing lighting for people throughout the world. So again, it's important that we try to make this as fair as possible and be aware of those biases and ensure that we're not depriving people by providing them with too little light for their safety, but also not putting more light into their spaces than they need at night, which can cause a number of problems. Okay, ready when you are to go on to the next topic, which is...
We got a leaderboard right here, our midway point check.
We're going to do our leaderboard?
Our leaderboard. Okay. Our number one leader right now is Ladislav. Congratulations to Ladislav at this point. P Mission, who I'm assuming is Alejandro, is tied with Adam, Michael Reimer, and Seattle Dan for second place. So congratulations, everyone. And I think it just means you're really quick on the trigger, basically, because it's going pretty fast. So don't get too down on yourself if you are not up here on number 1 or 2, because we are figuring out this trivia platform, and I think we'll have to give people more time next time. But it looks like there we go. We'll move on to the next slide.
Okay. So our next topic is about animals and plants, wildlife and ecology. How is all of this artificial light at night that we're generating affecting the environment? And it turns out that the effects are significant, and in some cases, it may be fatal for certain kinds of wildlife. One thing that you may have heard about in popular media is how insects are declining in their populations around the world, especially pollinating insects. Studies increasingly show declines in these populations worldwide, which is significant because the pollinators in particular are crucial to ensuring an adequate supply of food around the world. They perform what are called ecosystem services. So by collecting pollen and moving it between plants, insects are helping us with something that would be a challenge if it were left up to humans to do alone. And some research that was published a few years ago in the journal Nature suggested that artificial light at night is an important driver of these insect declines around the world. And the hypothesis here that researchers are working with is that artificial light at night is affecting pollinators in particular because many of those insect species are only active at night. And it may be helpful to them in some cases. It may draw them towards areas where plants are in need of pollination, but more often than not, what the researchers find is that it has a negative effect. That if pollinators are near areas where there are plants that need pollination, but there is a lot of artificial light at night, that they tend to stay away from those areas. So for them, this is important because it's one of their food sources. And it may be hard for them to find food from wild sources if the fields that need to be pollinated are very brightly lit at night. It can also make it difficult for insects to find potential mates at night, which in turn affects their populations over time. So this is something that I think would be of interest to everybody, no matter whether they know about light pollution or not, because we are so dependent on these insect species to ensure that we have an adequate amount of food to eat at night. And of course, it's not just pollinating insects. Birds are something that's of big importance. And thank you for going on to the next slide. This is a display of dead birds that were collected in the city of Toronto, Canada, over the course of one night by a group in Canada called the Fatal Light Awareness Project, or FLAP. And they go around to places like libraries and schools throughout Canada, and they lay out these displays of these birds that they collect in order to raise awareness about this problem. Migratory birds in particular are really susceptible to artificial light at night because they have these clearly defined what are known as flyaways. So as they're trying to make their way from one point to another on their migratory journeys, they tend to follow these preferential paths over different places in the world. And they often use either moonlight or the stars as part of how they navigate. So they need more or less dark skies in order to do this. But if they see the light of a city in the distance, they might be drawn off that migratory path. And if they're drawn down into a city where there are a lot of lights that mimic the light sources that they see in nature, it disorients them, it confuses them. Many of them that die fly into the windows of buildings at night that are either lit from the inside or their window glass is reflecting artificial light sources on the ground. And this is what FLAP does when they go around and they collect these birds that have fallen victim in cities, is they're trying to illustrate how important it is to reduce the amount of light we're using at night, use window glazing that is less reflective and is not as attractive to birds in order to help these bird species. And by the estimates that FLAP has made in conjunction with bird researchers, they estimate that the number of birds that die this way each year in cities around the world is probably in the many billions. And thinking about how a lot of these species are already under stress from climate change, habitat loss, and other influences, it's important that we try to support their populations by reducing these hazards to them. Next slide, please. And then I like to point out some of the other species, and I'm just going to use this one in particular, which is the Mexican long-nosed bat and its related species, the lesser long-nosed bat and the Mexican long-tongued bat, all of whom pollinate agave plants. So this is a picture taken at night of a Mexican long-nosed bat that's pollinating the flowers of an agave plant. And you can see the yellow pollen gets all over its face because they get right down into these flowers. And the reason that I point this out is that agave is the source of tequila. And if you love margaritas or other drinks made with tequila, you should care about light pollution. Farmers, particularly in Mexico and Central America, where they cultivate the agave plant for tequila production, really depend on these bats to do their pollination at night because they are the sole natural pollinators of agave. And other means of artificially pollinating the plant are very difficult and time intensive. So they rely on the bats to do most of the work for them. And we know from studies of these bat species that bats are deterred from visiting these plants at night. And so they don't pollinate them as often, which can interrupt the reproductive cycle of the agave. And it's bad for the bats as well because this is one of their food sources. And so let's go to the next question, which is about...
I'm going to maybe turn the timer off, and I'm going to pull up a question here maybe that you can address while I try to turn the timer off so we can help people answer these questions. Okay, so can you see this question? Maybe, Michael, you can read it to John.
I can see it.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Okay,
actually. Cool. Yeah, so this is a good point about the length of the day being very different in different parts of the world according to the season. And the migratory species, by and large, they can adapt to this because it's a relatively slow change. So even if you have an animal species that's resident in an area at the far northern or southern latitudes, like your location in kind of central Alaska, is I think where Fairbanks is, that change is gradual. It happens over a number of weeks, and animals are pretty well able to adapt to that. But in cases where we have lights in and near cities that are on all night or can change abruptly, you can have areas that go from no lighting to the lights suddenly being on all night, every night. And they're not really able to respond to that very well because it's such a quick change in their environment. The insects are the same way. They can also adjust to the changing length of the day. But if we start putting artificial light into their spaces in the times and places where they really don't expect it to be there, it can really have a harmful effect on them. So that's a really good point about the day length changing, and plants and animals have evolved pretty well to be able to accommodate that, but they don't handle the artificial light so well.
All right, that was perfect amount of time. So now let's try this again with no timer. So let me add this back to the stream here. Okay, are we all ready? Get ready.
We are ready.
Then we can have as much time as we want for the question, which is,
So about how many plant and animal species have been studied for effects from exposure to artificial light at night?
Okay, we got one answer, 3. Should be easier for all of you folks now. We'll give you some extra time here. 7, okay, doing better. 9, nice work, everybody. 10, can we get to 100? Can we get 14? If you're out there taking a nap, it's time to wake up and make a guess. All right.
I think you're liking this better. They're not under a time crunch.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
very stressful, I have to say.
Okay, here we go. We are going to close this and go to the next one. Okay, we have a 40-40 split on either 150 or 500, and then 20% have guessed 50. So the correct answer is 150.
Yes.
150. The actual answer is a little tiny bit higher than that. It's 160, and that's part of what we found when we compiled the State of the Science report by adding up all of the species that were mentioned in all of the papers that we looked at in compiling the report. And of course, there are probably millions of species on the Earth, not all of which we know about. Many we do. So the point here is that we've only studied a tiny number of the species on Earth, but in almost all of these studies, there is some harmful effect that is found on these plants and animals as a result of exposure to artificial light at night. That's what gives us reason to believe that nearly all species that are on or near the surface of the Earth are probably very sensitive to this light exposure and are probably suffering. In many cases, we simply don't know that because we haven't studied them yet. Mm-hmm. So keep in mind that that number, while it seems like it's a significant number, it's still pretty small compared to all the kinds of plants and animals that are out there. So great job, everyone. When you're ready, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic, which is about astrotourism. So now we're kind of moving into some of the more social aspects of light pollution and artificial light at night. This is something that's a new kind of sustainable tourism that's just begun to catch on throughout the world. And there are a lot of different kinds of activities that one might find if you go to one of these locations where astrotourism is popular. It can be anything from casual stargazing, looking at the night sky from dark places, but it can also be things like traveling to observe eclipses, like eclipses of the sun and the moon, or events like full moon walks. So you might go to a national park or regional park, and even on a night when the moon is very bright, a park ranger will lead you on a guided walk and talk about the nighttime environment and the nocturnal plants and animals. And oftentimes there'll be some message included in there about what light pollution can do, because it can mimic the brightness of the full moon in some cases. We think that this is a especially suitable kind of tourism for rural areas and improving their economic development, particularly in places where extractive industries like mining and logging and other sorts of industries are moving, or in some cases leaving these communities entirely. And it's a significant problem for their local economies. We're trying to encourage active preservation of dark skies by the responsible development of astrotourism in ways that ensure that as these industries grow and attract more visitors, that they don't just bring more light at night that ultimately harms the kinds of places that people are coming in order to be able to see dark night skies. And this is an attractive option for many of these rural areas because we think that astrotourists have an outsized economic impact on the places that they visit. That's because it's a kind of tourism that essentially requires the visitor to make an overnight stay. So as we like to say, you cannot drive through dark skies. Like you could make a daytime only visit to a park or a nature reserve, for example. If you're going to see the night sky, inevitably you're going to stay overnight somewhere in the area. And overnight stays have a much larger economic impact than daytime only tourism. There aren't a whole lot of studies on this, but we have a little bit of data in terms of trying to understand the potential for the economic impact that's associated with astrotourism. And that brings us to our next trivia question. So this is based on some research that was published in 2019, looking forward to the decade that we are in now, which is the 2020s. And it concerns a part of the western United States called the Colorado Plateau, which is parts of the states of Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. And the question is, how much tourism revenue is Dark Skies expected to generate in this area, the Colorado Plateau, by the end of the 2020s?
I should know this answer, but I don't.
Michael, this is like the paper on astrotourism. This is required homework for you now.
Yes.
It's cool to hear Alejandro, through astrotourism, was able to achieve a law for dark skies in Misiones, Argentina. So congrats, Alejandro.
That's great news. Yeah.
All right, we're at 11. I'm going to go ahead and go show what people have guessed here. Okay, a lot. The majority of people are guessing 850 million. So let's see what the correct answer is.
Oh my gosh.
$6 billion.
$6 billion. $6 billion in 10 years on the Colorado Plateau. And also the same study suggested that this industry by the end of the decade would contribute to employing thousands of people in this area. And that's really important if we want to convince governments to protect dark skies to further this industry, that they realize that it's not just the amount of revenue that can be earned through this kind of tourism, but also that dark skies really means jobs, and that we'll need to provide a sufficiently educated workforce to go out and be able to lead these night sky tours, whether it's through a place like a national park, or in many cases, especially here in the Western United States and in the Colorado Plateau, there are enterprising individuals that are setting up their own small companies and training people who are sometimes called dark sky rangers or night sky rangers that lead tours, some of which can be customized. So that attracts people who are coming to these places from other parts of the world, and in many cases are willing to spend a lot of money locally if they can have a highly customized adventure that they'll never forget. And then they'll go home and they'll tell the people that they know about what a great experience they had. And that hopefully will then draw even more people to come to these places. So if we can convince enough governments and people around the world to help protect these places for dark skies because they realize that it's an important contributor to their economies, we hope that they'll then also support the kinds of policies that will help keep these places dark over time. Okay, ready to go on with you are. So the next question is about our perception of light as human beings. And this diagram here from the excellent website, howitworksdaily.com, shows the connection between the eye and the human brain. So earlier we were talking about how we use light, how much light is falling on useful parts of the ground, how much light is being broadcast into the night sky or into maybe sensitive areas as far as the ecology is concerned. And one of the things that we learned from that is how relatively inefficient lighting is, how little light that our outdoor lighting generates actually makes it into the eyes of people who need it. And our visual system is the way that we process information about our world that involves both our eyes and our brains. And the little cutaway drawing there just to the left of center shows a cross-section of the human eye, and it's making an image of an object in space. In this case, it's like a coffee cup. And the light passes through the lens of the eye, which inverts the image, and it falls onto something called the retina, which is a collection of light-sensing cells that has been described sometimes as an extension of the brain. It's like part of the brain is reaching out into the world to directly interact with it. And after that image is formed on the retina, the cells in the retina send electrical signals deep into the brain, where the visual cortex that's at the back of our brains interprets that information. And it knows something about both the intensity of that light, but also about the colors that we see. We've evolved to have color vision. And of course, we have two eyes. We don't just have one. So we have what's called stereo vision, because there's a bit of a separation between our eyeballs, and that helps us understand the distance to things that we see in the visual field. And what's going on back there in the visual cortex is that the brain is connecting up what we sense through our eyes and our retinas to our memories, and building up a three-dimensional map of the world, as it were, that helps us not only navigate through it, but it calls to mind objects that we have seen before, so that we can better respond to what we find in that environment. So the question for human vision is, if you go on to the next slide, how many kinds of light sensing cells are there in the human eye? Not the total number of cells, but there are a certain number of major types of cell. How many are there?
All right, we're up to 6. 6 out of 15. That's not even half. Come on, guys. 8. Okay. I'll take 8. That's at least half. 9. Okay. I feel like we've been getting 10 pretty consistently.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's 2/3.
All right. I don't think we're going to get there, though. Let's go. Let's see what people have guessed. Okay. Half and half, say 2 and 3. When it is 3.
All right.
3. This is a little bit of a trick question, and I put in the number 2 as one of the possible answers. And I think a lot of people, if they've heard of this phenomenon before, they think of the cells that are called rods and cones, which you'll hear a lot about in human vision discussions. These are the what are called image forming cells in the retina. They provide detailed image information to our brains. The rods don't sense color, but they're very good at detecting faint light. Mm-hmm. And they tend to be out in the margins of our retinas, so they help with our peripheral vision at night. And then the cones are color sensitive cells that are mainly in the central part of our vision. So if you think about, if you're reading, or you're trying to read a sign, you're really looking with your so-called foveal vision. That's the center of your field of view. And there's a high density of these color sensing cells, with a few less of them out in the periphery. So between the two of those, that provides the color sensing information. But about 25 years ago, it was discovered that there's a third kind of light sensing cell in our eyes. It's called an intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cell, which is a long name. We just call it the IPRGC cell for short. And these cells are not image forming. They don't send any information to our brains about the world around us in terms of objects. Instead, what they're telling us is about the quantity of light that's in the environment, and particularly the amount of blue light. And this was the key to unlocking the secret of the human circadian rhythm. For a long time, we didn't understand how this daily 24-hour cycle in our bodies that controls when we're awake and we're asleep, we didn't know how it aligned with the length of the day, which changes throughout the seasons for most people, except those that live near the equator in the tropics. If you live at the mid-northern latitudes or mid-southern latitudes, like many people do, your that timing changes throughout the year as the length of the day changes. And so these IPRGC cells are part of that machinery that tells the brain and the body basically when to be awake and when to go to sleep at night. This is part of our concerns about human health and how it interacts with artificial light at night. Modern lighting tends to have a lot of that blue component. And if we're either exposed to it from outside lights that are coming into indoor spaces at night, or we're staring at our our phones and our screens too late into the night, it's sending a signal to the body that's telling us to be awake. And we know that there are problems with that in terms of relations to certain kinds of diseases like cancers, obesity, diabetes, and others. And lastly, just kind of the fun fact that I put in there is one of the options, the number 16 for the possible number of light sensing cells in the human eye. That's actually for a creature called the mantis shrimp that actually does have 16 different types of light sensing cells, some of which sense ultraviolet light. And it's a reminder that other kinds of species besides us as humans, we can see parts of the spectrum that humans don't. So in the infrared and the ultraviolet parts of the spectrum. And so we should be mindful about that kind of light making its way into outdoor spaces at night as well.
John, is there any way for me to get
Okay, if we're ready to move on, we have kind of a fun pop culture question for you next, and I hope that this video plays correctly. And the question is, what long-time running cartoon series features an episode about light pollution that was entitled, "Excuse Me While I Miss the Sky"?
This is my favorite question.
The Americans are probably more likely to get this right, but it's a popular show throughout the world, so other people probably heard of it too.
John, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Is there any way we can get 16 different cells in our eyes to see ultraviolet and infrared?
I wish we could, because I think the world would be a much more colorful place if we could see 16 different types of light. Also, check out the mantis shrimp's punching ability.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's unparalleled. It's like that's how it gets its prey. It sees it in all these colors, and then it reaches out, and in a fraction of a millisecond, it just punches its prey.
It's hardcore.
It's a pretty great creature.
All right. I am going to bring up the guesses here. Okay, we're all pretty much on the Simpsons train. And we are correct. It is The Simpsons. So let's go ahead and just take a good little look at this.
Is there any way you can share your audio?
Oh, you guys can't hear the audio?
No, we cannot.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
Or subtitles if
Pictures.
Let's see. Okay, here we go. That could be all of us out there. That is all of us out there.
It is.
To protect the night from light pollution.
And I just learned, because Joshua put this in the chat, I did not know there's an episode of Hey Arnold about light pollution.
Yes.
So anybody who's a fan of the classic Nickelodeon cartoons, definitely check that out.
Yep, that's right.
John, is this the right slide? A movement more than 50 years in the making?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, in the last few minutes here, we're going to wrap with a few questions about IDA itself. And this is for anybody who's interested in history. And I say it's a movement more than 50 years in the making because I'm showing you one of the first instances that I have been able to find that's sort of in the mass media that use the term light pollution is a story from the New York Times newspaper in June of 1971. But it goes back a lot earlier than that. If we look in historical records, we find that as early as the 1st century AD, so 2,000 years ago, in Roman sources, that there were already indications that people were observing a connection between light and the natural world. In particular, that there are some Roman authors who talked about the phenomenon of watching flying insects being drawn to oil lamps at night. So they already had this sense that there was some connection between light that humans were causing and changes in the natural world. light pollution really began to affect astronomical observations in around the 19th century as gas lighting systems began to appear in European capitals and then eventually in some North American cities, Japan, elsewhere in the world. And a lot of the astronomical observatories that used to be located right in big cities had to start moving their operations outside of those cities because of the gas lights, and which were eventually, of course, replaced by electric lights. The sort of modern sense of light pollution and its recognition, along with the need to proactively protect observatory sites, began in the 1950s. And right here in Arizona, where several of us are from, the city of Flagstaff, which is also the world's first dark sky city, enacted one of the world's first outdoor lighting policies in 1958. It was called the Searchlight Law. Here in Tucson in 1972, so just after this New York Times story, our city enacted what we think is the world's first comprehensive outdoor lighting policy that any city put into law. So how much longer after that did IDA come about? So that leads to our next question, which is, in what year was IDA, now called Dark Sky International, founded?
What was that, Betty Maya?
I said you better get this one right.
I think I did.
And Jim points out that the observatory in Providence, Rhode Island, had to move out of town in 1914 because of light pollution, over 100 years ago.
Philip's putting his guesses in the chat. Philip, you got to do it on your smartphone. All right, we're at 11. I'm going to show guesses now. Okay, 45% guessed 88, 36 guessed 95, 18% 2002. It was 1988. Good job, majority.
1988. Yes, this year marks 35 years of an international movement, and it's growing and it's bigger than ever. And of course, we appreciate all of you for supporting that movement. So one of the main outreach, education, conservation programs that IDA, or Dark Sky International, engages in is called International Dark Sky Places. I know some of you who are here today, I know that some of you have been involved in this. It's something that IDA originated as a way to recognize the efforts that are being made by people around the world to protect dark skies. And here are just a few of them. That's me there on the bottom center, standing next to Raider Lane at Grand Canyon National Park on the day that we gave them their certification in 2019. So that was a pretty great moment. Mm-hmm. But the program is it's something that really emphasizes action. A lot of people used to ask, is it just, do we pick dark places on a map and give awards out simply because places are dark? And the answer to that is no. It's not just a result of a place being dark, but that the people in those places have to work deliberately and proactively to try to protect what they have. And in some cases, we might even be able to roll back some of the light pollution where it's working very well. And something that I like to tell people is that even the world's biggest cities, for example, could become international dark sky communities if they chose to. That it's not necessarily starting with a dark sky, but that over time that you could get to a dark sky. As I mentioned in the previous slide, the program started in 2001 when Flagstaff, Arizona was accredited as what at the time was called a dark sky city, and has evolved into a program now that has designated over 200 places around the world in a number of countries, and is growing by leaps and bounds. In fact, I just read on IDA social media this morning that the town of Bee Cave, Texas, very close to where I used to live in Austin, Texas, has been named a dark sky community. So we're very excited about that news. So speaking of dark sky communities, and moving to the next question, how many cities and towns have achieved international dark sky community status? This is around the world, not just here in the US.
This is a hard one.
It is a hard one, and the number changed today, and we didn't know that it was going to change today.
So this
Pick the number that you think is
about
closest.
how many?
okay.
Yes, about how many.
This quiz is fraudulent. It's a farce.
We just roll with it.
Texas Hill Country does a lot of good work for dark skies, so.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. All right, I think 10's been about kind of our number. Oh, we got 11. Nice work. Okay, we're split between.
We are always split on some of these.
We are between 39 and 78. Let's see what it is. 39.
And of course, Bee Cave, Texas becomes number 40. So
Oh, that's a
our
good
slide
round
is
number.
already
That's
out
a
of
good
date.
round
Yes,
number.
it's another nice round number. So yes, the nearest answer among these is 39, and so that's a pretty amazing amount of growth in slightly over 20 years, considering that it's not easy to get the dark sky community label or really any of the designations in the program. It's tough. It takes a couple of years in most cases, and a lot of dedication by local people to make this happen. So when you hear about one of these designations or you visit one of these places, you know that this is a really hard-won accolade, and it really means something to the people that are able to achieve it.
Definitely.
Okay, ready to go on when you are.
We are there.
Okay, thank you. The slide that I'm showing you here has just some pictures from some of the places around the world that have been designated in the program during its history to suggest that it really represents a large diversity of places. There are national parks in the program, there are historical monuments, there are astronomical observatories like the one in the upper right picture. And one thing that these places can do for us is provide a natural laboratory for light pollution research. And they help us understand not only how nature reacts to light pollution, but also which kinds of changes to lighting that we make on the ground seem to work best in order to reduce light pollution. There's even some study results that we reported in the State of the Science report that indicate that dark sky places are a successful way of promoting dark sky conservation. And the way that was determined was by looking at the satellite observations of light at night from the Earth that showed that in the years following a designation, in many places, the light decreases in a way that we don't see if we look further away from them. So it's more of a local phenomenon, but it seems to be real that there are actual decreases in light at night that somehow relate to the designation that if we look at control areas that are further away, we just don't quite see the same effect. Earlier, I mentioned that the program had designated places in a number of countries around the world and that there were about 200 of them in total. But in how many countries, here's the next question. In how many countries are there international dark sky places? And how many places have parts of the world have these designations been made?
This is a hard one too. These are hard. I'm learning a lot. Should I turn the music back up? Just a little bit. Maybe we could switch it up. We could go with feeding the ducks.
Feeding the ducks.
Ooh. You guys like this one? All right, we're at 11. Let's go. Okay, pretty big split here. People are guessing 10, 19, and 23. 10 is the most common guess. Let's see how many it is. 23.
23. And that has grown so much in just the last several years as we've had countries, places like Austria and South Korea and Australia, New Zealand, places that we did not have any before are now part of the program. So it really shows that the program is growing in a way that is bringing this message about dark skies to people in more parts of the world than ever. I haven't tallied up the number lately, but I used to keep a tally of how many square kilometers of land are under the protections of the dark sky designated places in the program. And it was approaching 100,000 square kilometers not long ago. And that's the size of some smaller countries in the world. It's pretty amazing for a program that's only been around for a little over 20 years to have protected so much territory. So we've got one more question. If you go on to the next slide for me there. This is just this little montage of photos here is to give you a sense of that they're all over the world. To get and keep these designations, the International Dark Sky Places have to engage in pretty extensive public outreach. It's an important component to the program. And they are reaching millions of people each year with messaging about the importance of dark skies. And to use one of them as an example, I showed you in one of the earlier pictures, me giving the award over to the folks at Grand Canyon National Park. In that one place alone, they see about 5 million visitors a year from all over the world. And when they visit the canyon, if they go to the visitor center, they see signs that indicate that the canyon has an International Dark Sky Park designation, and there are lots of opportunities for people to hear about it in ranger tours, in interpretive displays throughout the visitor centers and other places in the park. So we're reaching a lot of people. The program is growing by leaps and bounds, and there is now a presence on all but one continent. And so our last question is, which is the only continent without a certified international dark sky place?
This one's not so hard.
Yeah, this is the gimme for the last question.
Should it be argued that this continent deserves a certification?
They have to earn it.
This is so everybody can feel good right at the end.
I don't think John can hear me.
I don't think John can hear you either. John, can you hear Michael?
No, I can't. I can't hear the background music. I can't hear him.
Weird.
None of that makes sense, but okay.
All I can see is your picture, and I have your audio, and the rest of the screen is blank.
Huh. Very interesting. Okay. All right, we got one guess for Asia, most of the guesses for Antarctica, and most of you were correct. It is Antarctica.
It is Antarctica, and there's no reason that we couldn't have a designated international dark sky place. There at one point was interest in maybe designating the South Pole Research Station, which is the only part of the continent that really has a permanent human presence. And they do a lot of astronomy from the South Pole, as it turns out. And yes, as Jim points out, the sun doesn't set for 6 months out of the year. But you know what? But that means it's also dark for 6 months out of the year. But to that point, we have been asked at times, what about places like Alaska, for example, or the far northern parts of Canada, places where you would have so many months out of the year when you have sunlight all the time. And those places can still be designated, of course, because for some fraction of the time, it's dark. And that darkness is even more important when it's 24 hours a day. In the same sense that we've been asked, well, what about weather? Can a place that is just cloudy all the time and you don't really see the stars very much, can it get designated? And the short answer to that is also yes, because the darkness is necessary for the ground, the plants and animals that live in those areas, even if humans aren't able to see the sky at night. So it just, I hope that one day we'll get some kind of official designation on Antarctica just to make it that we have a presence on all of the continents. But right now it's still the only place without that. So I'm going to have you, if you go on
Oh,
to the
no.
next slide.
Oh no, Michael. Okay,
Oh, no,
well,
it
Michael
happened.
obviously.
What have I done?
Michael obviously cheated, so.
I did not cheat.
It
Oh,
Oh, do we have the
no.
leaderboard?
looks like our winner is Vladislav. So
Yes, very good.
Vladislav. Jim coming in at a close second, and Adam and Alejandro at a close third. So congratulations, Vladislav. You can pat yourself on the back as the smartest, most trivia savvy dark sky person this Dark Sky Week 2023. And I mean, Michael, you can think that you're pretty smart as
I
well.
will.
too.
I am brought shame to the organization. I
But all right, congratulations, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this trivia journey. I think we have one more slide, it looks like, John, or a couple more slides.
Yep, this is just to remind everybody. I hope you learned something today. I encourage you to look at the State of the Science report. This is the 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting that IDA promotes, that's important for everybody to read and think about and share. The problems that we face with light pollution are really serious, but we're learning more about them every year. And we learn about the solutions as well. Those solutions are really simple, they're effective, and they're affordable. So if we all did more to try to get these 5 lighting principles out there in the world, we can reduce light pollution while improving nighttime visibility and protecting the nighttime environment from harm. So that's all I have, and I'm going to turn it back over to Betty Maya to close us out.
All right, this is my final slide with a invitation, a thank you to John, a thank you to Michael, a thank you to everyone who participated today. Well, maybe not a thank you to Michael. Just
Oh, yeah. I don't deserve that.
a huge thank you to everyone who joined us today. Lots of thanks. Thanks, learned a lot. Fun hosting, so fun and informative. We're glad you made it, everyone. Fun. Thank you for spending time with us this International Dark Sky Week. It truly means so much to us to spend time with all of you, to celebrate International Dark Sky Week with you. What is the point of doing this work if we can't have fun and celebrate and get together and really enjoy and celebrate what a dark sky is and learn more about it? So a huge thank you to John for putting this all together.
Thanks for having me.
And a big thank you to everyone for joining us here tonight. We would love for you to get involved with IDA's Advocate Network. We mentioned it at the very beginning of this presentation, but we have a global online platform where people can connect with advocates from all around the world. We have monthly trainings on various subjects that are kind of action-oriented meetings to get you involved in your community. We also have monthly just informational meetings. So there's really no shortage of ways to get involved with the International Dark Sky Association and to continue to hang out and chat and work with all of us here. So we all know how to use QR codes now. So here's the QR code. I will also pop a link in the chat to join the Advocate Network. It takes probably less than 30 seconds to just put your name, email, and basic address information in there so we know where you are and we know how to connect you to people who are near to you. And if you have questions, please reach out to me or Michael or anyone on IDA staff. And yeah, I think that might be, do I have another slide here? Oh no, if you're in Tucson, we got a star party at Saguaro West on Thursday at 7 o'clock, but that's not as relevant to our global community. So we'll come back to being involved with our Global Advocate Network. And we really look forward to continuing to celebrate International Dark Sky Week with you for the rest of the week. So John, Michael, anything you would like to add?
Thanks for coming today, everybody. It was fun.
Ditto to that. And I know John's going to hear it, so.
All right. Well, thank you. And hopefully we'll see you all back here tomorrow for Travis Longcore. And happy Dark Sky Week.